All right, what's up everybody? In this video, I'm going to be highlighting some different tips and ideas that I have to save the PFL slash Bellator. Yes, and I know that a lot of people out there feel some kind of way about the PFL and Bellator and all these different things. Put that aside because in this video, I'm really going to be highlighting some different things that I truly believe can help improve the PFL, help with gaining viewers, keeping people around. And this idea sparked from I saw Lucas Tracy, shout out to him. He put out a improving the business idea of the UFC. And that really got me thinking, man, about the PFL. I like watching these outside organizations and supporting combat sports, and especially in MMA, because not everybody can fight in the UFC, right? They have limited spots inside the organization, and there really are some outstanding fighters in these other promotions, right? And I like to see these guys get an opportunity to shine. And I like when the UFC is not having events, like if it's a Saturday night, we get something else on a Friday night, or there's an off weekend for the UFC, and we have something going on that's a little bit different just to switch it up. But it has become rather unbearable at times to watch the PFL slash Bellator. So in this video, let's talk about what we can do to help save that. Okay, starting number one, bring them under the same roof. All right, I know that the merger is something new between the Bellator, and PFL relationship, and the PFL swoops in and kind of absorbs Bellator and kind of controls things now. But Don Davis, if you don't know, is kind of the Dana White of the PFL, and then Scott Coker is the Dana White, so to speak, of Bellator. And these guys have been around the business for a while, especially the Coker back in, the Strikeforce days. I mean, Scott Coker has been around for a very, very long time. I would like to see Scott Coker a little bit more involved. I know that Don Davis, he's a hungry guy. He's got a fire to him, and he wants to get some things done. But just off of what I've seen so far from the PFL, we need some adjustments. And that starts and stops with just make this all under the PFL. Do away with Bellator and add all of the Bellator fighters under the PFL banner. Now you might say, wait a minute, Jake, they're fighting under PFL and Bellator. Yeah, exactly. But isn't that annoying? Isn't that very hard to keep track of? We have fighters fighting under Bellator one night, then all of a sudden they're fighting a guy in the PFL. Like, fuck that. Put everything under the same banner, make it a little easier for the viewers to follow, because that's exactly what I put here. Hard to follow what's happening. I mean, we got a Bellator event coming up in Ireland, and then certain fighters are only fighting Bellator, certain fighters are only doing PFL, some are cross-promoting. Enough. PFL, in my opinion, has the better name, right? When you see the PFL Professional Fighters League, that is more prolific and a better branding option, in my opinion, than Bellator, right? When you hear Bellator, you're like, what the hell is that? Unless you're a fan and you know what the hell Bellator is, when you hear PFL, you're like, oh, the NBA, NFL, NHL. It kind of rings a bell. They had the ESPN Plus deal. They have Redcon 1, Celsius, just some, Takedown, I think, is the apparel that's sponsoring the gear. They have some very solid sponsors, while being on ESPN Plus, like I mentioned. The opportunity is there. Now it's time to lock in. Let the fans get to know the damn fighters. And that starts and stops with just putting everything under the same roof, like I mentioned. In order for them to have a tremendous amount of success, I think that they're going to have to do this at some point, right? You just can't keep having just one-off events every now and then to where it's hard to follow and no one can follow along to what the hell's going on. They're going to need to fix that moving forward. So get everything under the same damn roof. Okay. Number two, this is a big one. Better commentary, for God's sake. All right, listen, I understand that these guys are professionals. And in this video, this is meant to be really no form of disrespect. This is just my honest critiques and honest breakdown, just unfiltered, okay? These gentlemen that I have on the screen, for the PFL to not say that Mike Goldberg, to not call up Mike Goldberg or Mauro Ranallo and be like, look, we want you to be the head honcho here leading the play-by-play, is just absolute blasphemy. It's disgraceful, and it's quite frankly, it's disgusting to me, because Mike Goldberg and John Anik are by far the two best play-by-play commentators in the game. And if Mike Goldberg, for some reason, is retired and doesn't want to do it, then Mauro Ranallo. This man, Mauro Ranallo, is an encyclopedia when it comes to combat sports. He has done WWE, MMA, boxing. He's done damn near everything. He's been around the game for such a long time. These two are far better than any of the play-by-play that we have going on in the PFL right now. And I know that, Mike Goldberg's done some work for Bellator and Ranallo's done some work for Bellator. Make everything under the PFL banner. That's kind of what I'm going off of here, is if everything's under PFL, make those guys the play-by-play commentators. If you need to have an A and B, fine by me. Get both of these guys on the mic, or at least one of them, for God's sake. And then Big John McCarthy and Josh Thompson need to be more involved. Look, I know that the PFL broadcast, they have Big John kind of Skype in and do a little bit of a Dean Thomas thing. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. Right now at the PFL, they got Randy Couture, Dan Hardy, Tyron Woodley. I mean, Jesus. Like, what are we doing, PFL? What are we doing? Like, I like Randy Couture, I like Tyron Woodley, and I like Dan Hardy. And if one has to stay, it's going to be Dan Hardy. But Randy Couture and Tyron Woodley, they can go work at the analyst desk, which is what I have here, which is where we see Anthony Smith, we see Karen Bryant, like we see Michael Chiesa. That is where I would like to see a Tyron Woodley and Randy Couture. They should not be anywhere near a broadcast table at this point. They lack enthusiasm, they lack excitement, and it's just very flat and dry. Where Big John McCarthy, he kind of gives a little bit of that Rogan vibe, right? He's not a former fighter. He's a referee. He's a different point of view, and he's excellent with his MMA knowledge, and he has personality, and when something happens, he goes, whoa! You know, like he provides something where Randy Couture's like, oh, that was a good shot, and then Dan Hardy kind of gives us a little bit of something. He's like, oh my God, and grabs his ugly hair, and he's like, oh, and also give Dan Hardy a telestrator, because I like Dan Hardy. I think he's got a great mind for the sport. He's good with the technicalities, but get Tyron Woodley off the broadcast as well. He's over there muttering like, oh, that was a really good takedown. That was an outstanding takedown. Oh, he's going to need to get back to his feet in order to win this fight. Like, come on, Tyron. Come on, Tyron. He's asleep at the wheel over there commentating. We need to get him at the analyst desk. That's where he's strong. He's done, the T-Wood in the morning or whatever. That is his strong suit. It's not being a color commentator off to the side or even in that Dean Thomas role, which we have. And for those of you that don't know what play-by-play and color is, play-by-play is the John Anik, color is like Daniel Cormier, Paul Felder, those guys that are providing context to what the hell's going on. Okay? And then the final thing here, improved ring announcing. This is what absolutely drives me the most insane, right? And I know fighters in Bellator and PFL, and I've even had this conversation with them before. I'm like, you cannot be excited to go out there and go to battle off of these ring announcers that they have. Like, I expect, and the fighters feel the same way, by the way, but Bruce Buffer, I understand that he's kind of an anomaly. He's, all the way up here in a little bit of a different category with the excitement that he brings. But as a ring announcer, you are supposed to make the fighters want to go to that next level. And from what we see from Michael C. Williams in Bellator and the other guy, I'm drawing a blank, I don't know his name in the PFL, they have good voices. They're professionals, but they don't provide the right kind of energy. Like the guy in the PFL is like, training out of this fight team. He is a mixed martial arts specialist. Like, that is not getting anybody hype and ready to go to war and go to battle. You're not taking them to that next level. And don't even get me started about Michael C. Williams. And fighting out of the blue corner, red, that's his cadence. It's very choppy. It's very obnoxious. It's like, go do NHL or something. He's a professional. He does have a good voice, but his cadence is not meant for fighting. Fighting out of the blah, blah, blah. Like, it's just not exciting. Your job is to send that fighter to the next level and is to get the crowd into it and hype. Like, even people rip on him, but Joe Martinez does a pretty good job. Kind of the B guy behind Bruce Buffer. Like, I know not everybody's going to be Buffer, so we have to be realistic in that aspect. But Dom Lau is a good example. The guy over in One Championship, he does a tremendous job as well. We need more energy overall from the commentary and the ring announcing, point blank. All right, here we go. Next, this one's in depth here. All right, cut out the damn seasons. Right? This is one of the biggest gripes that I have with PFL and Bellator, right? It is these seasons and these tournaments. I think they're entertaining from time to time, but the issue with this is you create a huge funnel of inactivity amongst the fighters, right? Inside organizations like this, not everybody's going to be the UFC. You can't compare to the UFC, but you can take some ideas and try to kind of reformat some things and essentially make them your own and find ways to kind of do something similar, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The UFC has laid out a very successful blueprint for you to follow. Don't do seasons. Don't do seasons. If you're going to do them, don't include your top fighters. And if you are going to include your top fighters, don't give them terrible stylistic matchups. One of the biggest fumbles I saw the PFL do, in their existence was why I have him up here in the top corner, Shane Burgos. I think we all know Shane Burgos by now, right? Very exciting fighter inside the UFC. They get him inside this season, whatever going on in PFL. They give him a good matchup, and then the very next matchup, which it's not even the semifinals yet, and they give him Olivier Mercier, the Canadian gangster, who is just an awful stylistic matchup for Shane Burgos. That is not, the UFC would never do that in a tournament. You want to make sure that the way you strategically put these brackets together, no matter what outcome happens, your top fighters that the fans are coming to see are going to excel and get to that final level to where you can see them in the championship, to where people are excited. Because what's been happening with the PFL, the matchmaking has lacked, and then they have the guys that aren't the big names in the finals and nobody's caring and tuning in. So that is definitely something that's going to have to be fixed. Follow the rankings like the UFC, right? I mean, we see over here, you see the featherweight standings. This is just an example. I like this. I like what we see here. Like I said, get rid of the regular season and the tournaments. Make it a structure. Actually have your belts mean something, because right now they just give random title shots to people. The champions are doing tournaments, like essentially defending their belts to guys that shouldn't even be fighting for a belt, depending on who they're matched up with. We get to the end and we're just left with this giant clusterfuck that doesn't make any sense. So let's follow the rankings, have some order, because if there's fans tuning in that are like, I've never seen the PFL, let me tune in and see what this is about. They're like, oh, this guy's ranked number 15. He's fighting the number 12 ranked guy, not like the number 15 ranked guy fighting the champion in the first round of a season. Like, this is dumb and it doesn't make sense. We want something that the fans can follow along with. So follow your rankings and put a consistent emphasis on valuing the order of your rankings, and matchmake accordingly, and actually stick to the divisions and actually honor the champion that's in there, a lot like what the UFC does. Okay, better matchmaking. I already kind of touched on this. PFL. Don't ever do that again, where you take your golden boy at the time. They were pushing Shane Burgos hard. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I mean, for God's sake, he was on every ad, every promo, every social media thing. Shane Burgos was the golden boy of the PFL at this time, and they just didn't do a good job with the matchmaking. Don't do that. Strategically matchmake. It's exactly what the UFC does. You may get called out for it. Who fucking cares? Dana White doesn't care. Whoever your cash, what I have here down below, right here, this point right here, protect your cash cows. Whoever your faces are, Ngannou, I got Johnny Eblin on here, Cedric Doumbé. Give these guys great stylistic matchups, build them up, let them build up their character, let them build up their persona, let them continue to build that record positively, create highlights that you can post on your social media. Protect your cash cows. Now, I understand that they're not like Conor McGregor's and this and that. Like, it's different than the UFC, but for their standards, the cash cows, protect these guys. Give them favorable matchups. Let them win. The striking is what puts butts in seats. Favor those guys. It's not to say that you can't, do something for the grapplers and things like that, but really focus on protecting those faces of your franchise, so to speak. Okay, and then last but not least on this slide here, sign more kickboxers. Take a page out of what the UFC is doing. They already kind of did this here when they signed Cedric Doumbé. Great signing by the PFL. Outstanding striker. The strikers are what put the butts in seats. The wrestlers are not putting butts in seats, ladies and gentlemen. I understand that a lot of people like wrestling. They like jiu-jitsu. I like good groundwork. Don't get me wrong. But what most fans want to see is good striking matchups. That's what they want to see. They want to see Izzy's. They want to see Alex Pineda's. They want to see guys that are going to stand and trade and throw punches and kicks and all the fancy different stuff. That's what puts butts in seats. Focus on signing some of these kickboxers. The UFC can't sign all of them, and some of these kickboxers are like, I don't want to sign for that. That's a low amount of money. Like Cesar Almeida, they could have sweeped him up. So they were able to secure Cedric Doumbé. Continue on that route, and I think the PFL can bring in some more excitement to where you got these guys with highlight reel knockouts, all these different things that you can post on social media that, again, draw attention to what you're doing. Moving on. This has to be the biggest Achilles heel out of everything with the PFL right now. The broadcast experience / quality is absolutely atrocious. It's terrible. It seems to get worse every time I watch a PFL card. And I'm not exaggerating. And I really, again, it's not to be disrespectful. I'm just grading this without a filter. The broadcast experience is terrible. And if you watch the PFL, you recognize a very similar camera angle to this right here. PFL, if you're watching, if you happen to see this video, Get rid of this goddamn shot. This is the worst filling airtime thing you could possibly do. As a fan, when we are sitting there and you put this dumb camera angle up there for what seems like a half an hour, which it's not a half hour, I'm exaggerating, but it feels like an eternity. We're come off a high, off a good matchup, and then you do this. There's no commentary, there's no anything. We hear a little music in the background. People are going to log off. They're going to tune out. They're going to be like, what the hell? This is, what's going on here? A minute's went by. There's no walkouts. Like, get the fighters going. I don't know if that's like a delay in the broadcast, if it's a lack of organization in the back to where we're waiting on fighters to make walk. I don't know what the hell's going on. Figure it the hell out. We can't be sitting here above the cage staring at nothing for however long that is, because people are going to click off. They're going to go do other things and be like, the hell with this. This is boring. I don't, and all those things that they're like, this is in the UFC. Because again, that's what you're always going to be compared to. You're not going to be able to compete with them, but you can still put out a much better quality broadcast of what you're doing. And like I said, the commentary plays a big factor. The ring announcing, you need more energy in those departments. Okay, live viewer entertainment. PFL, I've seen a lot of scenarios where there are not many people in the crowds. I don't know what is going on with that. Give away some goddamn tickets. Give away VIP experiences like what we see here. BKFC does this. The UFC even does this. Like let's go. Let's get people excited. Let's, even at the BKFC, I've been to some of those events. And yes, they aren't the UFC, but you know what they do? They have an MC that goes in the ring or whatever he is, and he shoots t-shirts out of a cannon into the crowd, and he's like asking people, who do you think's going to win the next fight? Like, get people excited in the crowd. Give away tickets. Get these seats filled out. You should never have empty seats in there. And especially if these arenas are going to be tiny, it's embarrassing when there's not a lot of people in the background, because viewers that are watching on TV see that and they're like, well, I guess there's nothing really good going on. I don't see anybody there. And if it's the prelims, I get it. But when we get to the main card, that thing should be stacked out. And credit to Bellator and Scott Coker when they were doing this, because those arenas were usually pretty full. But from what I've seen from the PFL recently, there's not many butts in seats. And also, whenever you did the champ versus champ thing back in February, that should have been sold out. It should have been packed to the gills. But nonetheless, give things away, VIP experiences, get some fans out there, give them some swag and apparel, make them excited to want to be a part of what the PFL is doing. Okay. Promotion/marketing, kind of what I was just touching on. The PFL, man, they really do put some really great graphics together. They do, and I sincerely mean that. And these are really well made. But we need to hit the trailers and promos harder. I understand budgets are not what the UFC is, and I don't know what the budgets are, so, it's easy for me to say. But we've got to do a better job of creating some better highlight montages, things to promote the other fighters on the card. We got to introduce these fighters to the fans, a quick 10 to 15 seconds on who this fighter is before they make the walk, and, just more video-based content. These graphics look great. They look nice. You can post this with the times and the dates and all those different things, and some of the main stars, like what we see here, Cedric Doumbé in the center, the tower behind. Like, I like that, okay? And then we go over here back when Kayla Harrison was there. We have Olivier Mercier, Clay Collard, Aspen Ladd. Like, these are some of the bigger names in the PFL. Good job here, right? But look at this. Look at what we're doing here. If Friday is your time, make Friday your time. Why are we on Saturday in Paris? Why are we in Friday here? If Friday is your day, which is what it seems like the PFL is rolling with, always keep it Friday. That way, the UFC is on Saturday. There's essentially nothing else on Friday nights in terms of combat sports. Boxing is going to be on Saturday night, most likely. You own the space Friday night. You're on ESPN Plus. Take advantage of that time, and you just have to be consistent with when you're doing this. And that's fine if you're going to be in a different country, but, and you have to adjust the times. But don't do a card in France at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. Like, that is just dumb. Have it on a Friday. Keep the day the same so fans, again, know and are in the routine of like PFL Friday, PFL Friday, PFL Friday. And stop wasting, your time by doing these events on different days and things like that. I understand venues and booking and things like that may play a factor. Strive to keep things on track with Friday. Last but not least, stop showing UFC fighters. Guys, This is one of the I understand why this is being done, right? You post a clip of John Jones like we see here. He's, in Abu Dhabi or Saudi, wherever that card was, the Riyadh season. And we got John Jones. We want to bring him on the broadcast and we want to, do all this and that. When you do that, I understand it's good for clicks. It's good for attention. When you do that, you're immediately now talking about the UFC. This isn't a PFL fighter. Have the PFL fighters in the crowd, put them on the camera. I know it's not going to get the same reaction as a John Jones, but do that to get the fans to know who these people are. Stop using the UFC fighters as an opportunity to kind of promote, because again, you're taking the viewer away from thinking about the PFL to now thinking about the UFC. And you're like reminding them of just stop doing that. I understand it gets you clicks and attention and whatever, but focus on your own fighters and your own organization. Because if you do that, then it seems to be a little bit more based around what you're doing and stops people from having their mind wander to the UFC and all these other things. But nonetheless, these are some different improvements and adjustments that I think the PFL can make moving forward. Like I said, guys, I want these other organizations, especially the PFL, because I think they have a lot of room for growth. There's a lot of opportunity here. They have the backing, they have investors, they have everything that they need. And I understand the budget is not with the UFC, and the UFC is the standard. They are, the alpha in the industry. But the PFL can do just fine for themselves. It's the little things that they need to focus on and hone in on to make these things a heck of a lot better. And also, one last thing before we wrap up this video. Don't ever sell a pay-per-view anytime soon, PFL. Listen, I understand. Bellator did a great job of this, right? They never really did pay-per-views. You had to have a Showtime subscription, whatever. Having an ESPN Plus subscription, in my opinion, is plenty. That's plenty, right? Put the prelims on YouTube. I know sometimes they're streaming things on YouTube. Bellator has always done this. They put the prelims on YouTube. You're going to get free viewers. MMA fans are all over YouTube, PFL. They are. They're on there watching content creators. They're watching all sorts of different things. Anything free, people are going to flock to and watch. If you make it free, people will watch. And then just air the main card on ESPN Plus. Don't charge a pay-per-view anytime soon until you can really build this thing up. Because I can promise you, nobody's buying the damn pay-per-view. And if you're like, we have to do a pay-per-view, it's in our deal with ESPN or whatever, make it 10 to 20 bucks. And it's not disrespectful. It's the truth. Nobody is going to pay $50 for a pay-per-view when they're like, we got the UFC tomorrow or next weekend and they got a big pay-per-view and it's 80 bucks. I'm just going to save that 50 and put it towards that. Like, nobody's paying $50 for a pay-per-view. I'm sorry. It's the truth. May upset you. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Like this video. Again, comment your opinion below. Do you agree with me? What are some things you would add? What are some things you agree, disagree on? Whatever you guys feel. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Help your boy out. I appreciate you all. See you next time.